This evening, Crave is talking to Tristan Hughes. Now, Tristan, how exactly am I to introduce you? Because you're not the usual talent that we have on Crave. So who are you and what are you?
Well, I guess it'd be, I think you could call me just, I guess a history journalist or broadcaster. I'm the host of the Ancients podcast, and I'm a presenter at the company, the kind of history multimedia company, History Hit. People have in the past called me an ancient historian, but then you get the inevitable comments, oh, he doesn't look that old. So
you,
we'll avoid that one for now.
you've just stolen my very best line for the
Oh,
entire
I'm
interview now.
sorry.
I've been rehearsing that one as well. But when you say ancient history, I mean, we're on a planet that's 4.5 billion years old. How far back are we going?
Well, I mean, that's the fun thing. So ancient history, I think if you want to be really kind of nitpicky, history is kind of, written, recorded history. So you could go back to Mesopotamia and the Bronze Age, so maybe 7,000 years, and the end of ancient history. It's very difficult to put an exact date. I think it's actually impossible to, but we like saying maybe it's to the end of the 5th century AD CE, around that time where you
Yeah.
have in Europe at least the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Admittedly, on the Ancients podcast, we do more than ancient history. I love the prehistoric stuff. Stone Age, Ice Age, our human ancestors, even going far as dinosaurs and those animals before dinosaurs as well. So we do also delve into kind of prehistory and paleontology too. So I like to think of ancient history as everything before 500 AD, at least in the podcast's sake.
Fair enough. So obviously, given that you're about to come down to the South Pacific, but we're talking very much about an Indo-European kind of concept right now. So how do you think that's going to translate down here?
Um, So you mean as in regards to the topics that we're going to be
Yeah,
covering?
yeah,
Dan? Yes, well, I'm excited to see. It was recommended that we should do like kind of ancient Greece and Rome because I guess for Australia and New Zealand that's something that's happening, the world away. So it's quite
yeah.
different. Um, we also know from our audience that the stories that exist from ancient history, kind of the myths that also have some potential kind of basis of truth behind them, the kernel of truth, kind of trying to figure out what is actually the real basis behind some of these stories, and then what's the fiction, what's the fact, and so on. That's also very popular and very intriguing, we found with people. So I mean, I'm hopeful. It seems like tickets are going well, and like we've got some brilliant guests lined up, and I think the topics are really cool to explore that the mythical story, but also then delve into the archaeology and what might be the kernels of truth behind them.
Right. So what usually if I'm talking to musicians, it's dead easy, right? So let's say for just to pick a band completely at random, let's say Dire Straits, for example, right? If I was talking to Mark Knopfler, I'd ask him, "Are you going to play Money for Nothing?" And obviously, we know. But I mean, what does one expect from a historian, ancient or otherwise? I mean, what are your greatest hits?
As in, what are our greatest hits of all time? I mean, our podcast episodes, some of our most popular have been, I mean, quite varied. A lot of our prehistoric stuff does very well. We did one last year on the last Neanderthals with one of the leading experts of human evolution. His name was Professor Chris Stringer. That
Mhm.
still ranks as one of our top ones. The Epic of Gilgamesh we did.
Oh yeah,
That's also, so things like that. We found topics that aren't, kind of right at the forefront of people's minds, but can it inspire straight away that idea of mystery, of intrigue? One we did recently, very popular, was one all about the prehistoric plague, right?
ooh,
So it's just
okay.
like, oh, and it is about a story of people bringing in what becomes the famous plague of later thousands of years, actually back in the Bronze Age, so several thousand years ago. But we've also done ones if we kind of link to what the topics are going to be for going down to New Zealand in particular, which can be Romulus and Remus. So that's like the mythical story of Rome's founding. But then also looking at what is actually what might be the story of early Rome in the early first millennium BC, when supposedly these twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, set about founding Rome, and then Romulus kills Remus, and then he founds Rome alone. We found also in that kind of ilk when we've done stories relating to, let's say, the Trojan War or things like that, where there's the clear mythical story from Homer, the Iliad, and of course the Odyssey afterwards, that people are also fascinated by learning about. Well, we've got an archaeological remains that we believe are Troy.
Mhm.
What is the archaeology revealing about what supposedly happened more than 3,000 years ago when that epic story is set? So, what are the kernels of truth behind that? So, All the ones I've already mentioned, those kind of ones with a bit of mystery behind them and intrigue, always do well. But kind of linking into what we're going to be doing in New Zealand with Romulus and Remus, um, we've seen time and time again that the ones that have a mythical story and then exploring what might be the kernels of truth behind them, they always seem to be really popular as well, which I'm glad because I also absolutely adore them.
Cool. So I understand the focus is going to be Romulus and Remus for this show, yeah.
Mm,
So I mean,
absolutely.
I've always wondered. I mean, I know it's sort of. I'm trying to think how to word this. We start off with a mythical story, and then eventually we sort of like elide elegantly and seamlessly into fairly established history with the kings of Rome. So I'm fascinated to actually hear the story of how the historicity of that changes from myth to actual verifiable history.
Well, you say verifiable history, but for some of those early kings of Rome, a lot of that is still quite, there's a lot of myth and myth around them because the sources we have for very early Rome are written by Roman writers,
Right.
and sometimes Greek writers from several centuries later.
Are you
So
suggesting they might not be the most impartial witnesses?
I am absolutely suggesting that, Steve. I
Gosh,
think that's my job. I'm afraid. I'm
terrible.
sorry.
Shameful.
But yes, no, exactly. So this is why I think archaeology for this one's going to be so interesting because there's been a lot of work in that kind of that central Italian area,
Mhm.
delving deep, even in Rome itself, trying to find out, what is actually there from the earliest levels, what is there from the early first millennium BC, and for context, the traditional date for the founding of Rome by Romulus and Remus is 753 BC.
Right.
But I mean, and then trying to dig down into that area, especially when you've got Rome today as a city still lived in, it's the
Mm.
capital of Italy, and there's layers and layers and layers of history there. It's difficult. So what we'll also almost no doubt be doing is, yes, we'll be tackling those sources that do survive,
Yeah.
and then exploring archaeology from elsewhere in Italy that might date to that time, because we know Italy almost 3,000 years ago. It's an amazing place for all these different peoples, mysterious names going back to what we mentioned earlier, like what I was saying, that kind of the mystery names really intrigue people. One civilization that always gets big numbers when we've ever done an episode on them is the story of the Etruscans. I don't know if you've
Right.
heard of them at all, Steve.
Yeah, they were contemporary Italians, weren't they?
Exactly. I mean, they're big in the north of Italy. They're when Rome is small and like kind of early in the Roman story, actually the Etruscans are top dogs
Mhm.
in that part of the world. And so we're no doubt be exploring kind of the archaeology from there as well to kind of get a sense of actually what was happening. But first, we will delve into the myths, into the stories, and then we'll tackle, okay, what might be the fact, what might be the fiction, and leave our amazing audience to decide, what they believe, quite frankly.
Very good. So, I mean, I guess the challenge is, look, I can remember back when I was. I mean, this is actual ancient history now, right? When I was in high school, history was the domain of people who looked like they actually lived through the Trojan War themselves. Tweedy jackets and the sort of the patches on the elbows type dudes, and these were lessons where you could catch up on your sleep. So how do we make history not that anymore? How do we make it something that people are going to pay good money to want to come and see on stage?
I think we're already there because I think when this new media world where you have so many people, I mean, we can go through the different modes. I mean, you got social media first of all, Instagram and TikTok, where you see so many kind of history influencers today creating small videos. For instance, here in London, we got quite a few who go around London and pointing out, did you know that right under this spot is a Roman amphitheatre from 2,000 years ago? And they go incredible. They get very, very popular on social media. If you look in like kind of the film world, of course, what are some of the biggest films and movies and kind of series of the present day? You've had Game of Thrones recently. You've got Christopher Nolan's Odyssey coming up.
Mm,
You've got ancient history and history just being promoted right in front of you as this cool, these events that happened thousands of years ago, or these stories that were set thousands of years ago and were created thousands of years ago, and everyone's raving about them. And I think lastly, documentaries as well, they're much more accessible today to everyday public, and podcasts. What I'm getting around to is the fact that you now have so many different strands of the media where people can much more easily engage with history,
right.
with archaeology, with ancient history, and find a fascination with it because there are so many people out there now, thank goodness for this, who have decided to kind of, set up these podcasts or YouTube channels or documentaries, create them and share them with the world, and be able to be accessed by hundreds of thousands. That's one of the things that blows me away with the Ancients podcast is how popular it's become. We, and I very proudly say this, we nerd out. We nerd out a lot about a particular topic from ancient history or prehistory in every episode, but people seem to love it. We did an in-depth one on the Pharisees, just trying to figure out who actually these people were. It went mentally popular. We've done the Library of Alexandria, another mystery one, also incredibly popular with our audience because they've heard the name, and now in the modern age, they have access to experts, they have access to the media that allows them to learn a lot about it in the space of 40 minutes an hour.
Yeah. So what you mentioned one word in there that suddenly set my pulse racing because my very first degree was biblical studies, and so you mentioned the Pharisees, and I'm wondering. You also mentioned the Epic of Gilgamesh earlier, and obviously there's a tie-in with the flood
With
back
the
in
flood.
Genesis, right? Now, when I was doing that degree, I know there were an awful people push back when their preconceived notions were challenged. And oh, you can't say that because that goes against what I learned in Sunday school. Do you run into that kind of thing? I mean, I don't suppose there's many people who are offended by you challenging the historicity of Romulus and Remus, but do you get that kind of thing so much?
Not really. I mean, not that I've seen. I mean, the vast majority of, I mean, in regards to the reception of that, is people just, actually because I'm a Christian myself. I'm a Protestant, and I'm very easy with exploring these stories
Mm-hmm.
and trying to understand, what is the inspiration behind these people who are, whether it was the 6th century BC, 7th century BC, what was their motive for creating these stories to explain their origins, their
Right.
beginnings, and how it also you can't ignore the similarities so many of these stories have
Yeah.
with other cultures of the time. We mentioned the Epic of Gilgamesh. There's also a Babylonian epic called the Atrahasis, which is about the flood. The flood, and it's very very similar to that of Noah's Ark,
It is.
and it's not kind of pushing back against anyone's faith or belief, like for me at all. It's more of actually trying to understand the worldview of these people and how they were drawing on other cultures as well when they were creating these stories. And to answer your question, Steve, no, I haven't really seen much pushback. The vast majority of people just like I'm loving learning actually what we actually know. What is the archaeology telling us behind these stories? What is actually the history saying?
Brilliant. So, I mean, history really is having a bit of a moment, I guess, with now with things like the Rest is History podcast
Yep.
is
Yep.
one being ranked one of the best, most popular
Absolutely.
podcasters.
It's a cultural export of the UK today, and I think many podcasts will become cultural exports of the country where they're based today.
Yeah. So so if you could pick any topic to do a deep dive into, I mean, obviously you're picking ancient Rome right now. Where historically where is home for you?
So home for me is actually the world of Alexander the Great, but in particular when he dies.
Oh,
So he
okay.
dies age 32. Everyone says, "Oh, he dies so young," and that's the catch line, isn't it? But I always actually push back now that he was lucky to live as long as he did because he fought many many battles,
Mm.
suffers many many wounds. He's very lucky at times. He's a brilliant military strategist, but over time you can see that his health deteriorates mentally and physically, and then he dies and he leaves this empire, the likes of which the
Hmm.
Macedonia had never seen before, and it's ultimately you get this fascinating period, Steve, like on and off for the next 40 years, where largely his generals, several of his generals, are fighting. They're squabbling over control of this empire, and there are massive battles, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of combatants fighting, horsemen, professional infantry. You've got chariots, you've got battle-hardened elephants as well, who've come all the way from India. You've got scheming, you've got betrayals here, there, and everywhere. You've got members of Alexander the Great's royal family, including his sister, his mother. They're all scheming, they're all competing, they're all vying with one another, trying to pick the best alliances at the best time to try and survive, to try and make it through this chaotic new world that Alexander has left with his empire, as his generals are basically fighting over what remains and fighting against each other for it. It's amazing, Steve, and it's overlooked. It's remarkable. It's chaotic, but I love that.
And see that last thing said right then, I love that. This is where the passion for your subject really shines through. And I see that you're playing. You're only going to be in New Zealand for one night. You're going to be
I
at the
know.
Bruce Mason Centre up in Takapuna in Auckland on on August the 8th. But other than the sheer absolute energy and passion, what does the show look like? What can we expect?
So the show, the bare bones of the show, if someone hasn't listened to an episode of The Ancients, is normally a one-on-one interview where I'm interviewing an expert, normally a professor, or a historical fiction writer once in a while. They're brilliant storytellers, or someone who's just written a book. Largely, it's professors where we nerd out, where we delve into the details of the particular topic that they've
Right.
spent many years focusing on, and we're kind of bringing their passion to the forefront. And I love asking them questions because they've given me their time. They've given us their time for 40,
Right.
50 minutes. So that's normally it's a one-on-one interview with an expert, and we delve deep into a particular topic from the fall of Rome to terror birds to biology's Big Bang 500 million years ago, the Cambrian explosion.
Right.
So a recognized expert, basically. With the live shows, we're going to keep that format. It's a one-on-one, and we have our guest confirmed. It's Dr. Jeremy Armstrong. He's from the University of Auckland, so he's a local
Cool.
lad, and he's
Excellent.
an expert on early Rome. But of course, with the live show, we're going to get a bit of visuals into it as well. We're going to have audio. We're going to have interactions with the audience. We'll kind of set it up so that we'll explore the myth of Romulus and Remus first. We'll delve into the stories, kind of, and the nitty bitty details of it, and then we'll take a step back and say, right now, what does the archaeology show? Can it back up any of this? What do we actually know from this time period? But yeah, I mean, Steve, that's the overall thing. It's one-on-one interviews where my job is to make the guests look as great as they can, and is to shine a light on them and their expertise.
Right.
Because the thing is, these professors, I mean, you used that description earlier, that idea that people had in the past of it's people in tweed jackets, or they just kind of hold up and they don't do much engagement with the wide world. That is now changing. You've got
Yeah.
brilliant professors here, there, and everywhere. And we at the Ancients just do our part to kind of help make that, to help give them as much promotion as possible. And I mean, it's a pleasure to have Jeremy join us for this one.
Well, that sounds absolutely fantastic. So I'm very conscious of not taking up too much of your time tonight. Um, but thank you so much for talking to us. So Tristan Hughes, like I said, you're going to be in Auckland on Saturday, August the 8th, at the Bruce Mason Centre in Takapuna, and we're going to be talking all about Romulus, Remus, and whether or not they actually even existed. And I tell you, it's going to be an excellent show. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Steve, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.